Three men are sitting in three identical rooms, and one of them is about to be a millionaire. They don't know which one. Neither do you yet, because they're the same man, same job, same salary, same discipline, same $300 a month going into the same boring index fund every month, without fail, until the day he turns 65. Nothing separates them. Not talent, not luck, not income. Not a single decision any of them makes for the rest of their lives. The only difference is the year the first payment leaves the account. One of them starts at 18. One starts at 30. One starts at 45. That's it. That's the entire experiment. Same money, same market, same crashes, same recoveries, just a different starting line. And here's the part that should not be true. At 65, one of them has $1.3 million. One has $540,000. One has $156,000. Same $300 a month. Same person. A difference of over $1 million, decided entirely by a date. That gap is not what most people think it is. It isn't the money. The one who ends up with the million doesn't put in that much more. You'll see the exact figure later, and it's small enough to be genuinely upsetting. There's a moment near the end of this where one of these men stops investing entirely at 30 and never puts in another dollar for the rest of his life, and still finishes ahead of a man who keeps paying in faithfully for 35 years. That's not a trick. That's just what the math does when nobody's watching it. So let's watch it. Three men, one dial, and the only thing we're going to turn is the year. Start with the 18-year-old. He's got nothing to invest with, which is the first thing worth saying out loud. He's making almost nothing. He's got a car that needs something, a phone bill, and roughly 11 better uses for $300 than putting it somewhere he can't touch for 47 years. 47 years. Say that to an 18-year-old and watch his face. It isn't a timeline, it's a rumor. 65 is not a real age to him. It's something that happens to other people, in other houses, with other knees. But he does it anyway. Not because he's wise. He isn't. He's 18. He does it because somebody showed him a chart once and he didn't have a good argument against it, and setting up the transfer took 4 minutes on a Tuesday, and then he forgot about it, which turns out to be the single most valuable thing he ever does. That's the whole mechanism, by the way. The forgetting, not the discipline. Nobody has 47 years of discipline. He just built a thing that runs without him and then went and lived his 20s. And his 20s are exactly what you'd expect. He's broke in the ordinary way. He moves apartments 4 times. He has a stretch where $300 a month genuinely hurts, and he considers stopping and doesn't, mostly out of inertia rather than conviction. Nobody notices. There's no version of this where the account does anything interesting enough to mention at a party. It's a number on a screen he checks maybe twice a year, and it's small, and it stays small for a long, long time. His friends are doing something else with their money, and there's something else is visible. There's a car, there's a trip, there's a watch that gets mentioned, and there's nothing to show for what he's doing. No object, no photograph, no story. Just a line item leaving an account every month toward a man he's never met and doesn't much care about. Himself at 65. At 25, after 7 years of paying in, he's got about $32,000. He has put in $25,000 of it. 7 years of showing up, and the market has handed him $7,000 for his trouble. $7,000. Over 7 years. That's $1,000 a year for being patient. And if you told him that was the deal at the start, he'd have laughed at you and bought something. And he does the thing everyone does at that number. He looks at it and thinks, that's it? 7 years? That's what all of that was worth? He could have made $7,000 in a summer of overtime and had the summer to show for it. The account has been the least impressive thing in his life for the better part of a decade. This is the part everybody quits. right here. Not because the plan fails, but because the plan is boring and the returns are pathetic, and the whole thing looks, from inside year 7, like a very slow way to get almost nowhere. He doesn't quit, mostly because he's not paying attention, and the account keeps doing the unremarkable thing it's been doing since he was 18. Now bring in the second man. He's 30. And here's what matters about him. He is not a failure, and he is not lazy, and he did not waste his 20s. He did what almost everybody does. He was 22 and had nothing. He was 25 and had debt. He was 28 and was finally barely above water. And during all of it, he knew. That's what makes him worth taking seriously. He wasn't ignorant. He'd seen the same chart, heard the same advice, had the same conversation with the same friend who wouldn't stop talking about index funds. He knew exactly what he was losing every year he didn't start. Knowing was never his problem. Having 300 spare dollars was his problem. And knowledge does not pay into a fund. 30 is when it became possible, not when he became willing. He'd have been willing at 22 if you'd handed him the money. 30 is just when the math of his actual life allowed for $300 that wasn't already spoken for. So he starts. Same fund, same 300, same everything, 12 years behind. And on the day he makes his first payment, his balance zero, his intentions perfect, the 18-year-old, who is now also 30, is sitting on $67,000. $67,000 for being early. That's the head start, and here's the thing about it. The head start is not the point. It looks like the point. It's the smallest part of what's about to happen, and if you showed the 30-year-old that number, he'd feel something specific and familiar, a flinch, and then a calculation. He'd think, fine, 67,000. I'll work harder. I'll catch up. 12 years is nothing across a whole life. He is at this moment completely certain that effort closes that gap. He has 35 years to find out that it doesn't. Because that 67,000 doesn't just sit there being 67,000. It's got 35 years left to run, and it's going to spend all of them making money that makes money. The two of them are the same age now, same room, same salary. Both paying in $300 a month, both will keep paying until 65, both equally committed from this second forward. Everything about their futures is identical. They will not finish anywhere near each other. Run it forward. They're 35, then 40. The market does what the market does. A bad year, 2 good ones, a flat stretch that makes everybody wonder why they bother. Both men ride it out. Both keep paying. And the gap between them, which started at $67,000, is not staying at $67,000. At 45, the man who started at 18 has $287,000. The man who started at 30 has $95,000. Look at what happened there. 12 years ago, the gap was $67,000. Now it's $192,000. It nearly tripled, and neither man did anything differently. Nobody made a better decision. Nobody got a better return. They're in the same fund. The gap is growing on its own. It's compounding, too. That's the part nobody explains. You're not behind by the money you didn't invest. You're behind by the money that money would have made, and that number gets bigger every year you stand still, whether you're contributing or not. That's why waiting feels so cheap and costs so much. When you skip a month at 22, it feels like $300. It isn't. It's $300 times 43 years of doubling, and the receipt for it doesn't arrive until you're 65 and can't do anything about it. The bill is always sent decades after the purchase, which is precisely why nobody connects the two. The 30-year-old, now 45, is doing everything right. He's been faithful for 15 years. He hasn't missed a month. He hasn't panicked. And he is falling further behind a man who is doing precisely the same thing he is, because that man showed up 12 years earlier. You can't out-discipline a head start. He's about to find that out with a number. Now the third man, 45. He's the one most people watching this actually are. So let's be careful with him. He's not a fool. He's had a life. There were kids, or there was a divorce, or there was a business that didn't work, or there were just 25 years of the money being needed somewhere else every single month, which is the most common reason of all and the least dramatic. He gets to 45, and something clarifies. Retirement stops being a rumor. It becomes arithmetic. He can count the years on his fingers, twice, and that's the whole runway. So he starts. Same 300, same fund, same discipline. More discipline, honestly. He wants it more than either of the other two. He is more motivated on his first day than the 18-year-old was in his entire first decade. It doesn't matter. That's the hard part. Wanting it does not appear anywhere in the formula. There's no line in the math for how badly you need it. The market does not know he's 45. It does not know about the divorce or the business or the 25 years of the money being needed somewhere else. It doesn't know he's the most committed person in this story. It reads a balance and a number of years, and it does the same thing to everybody. He has 20 years. The 18-year-old had 47. He is not working with half the time. He's working with a bit over a third of it, and compounding does not pay you in proportion to your time. It pays you exponentially. The last decade of a 47-year run is worth more than the first 30 combined. He doesn't get the last decade. He gets the first one, twice. Because that's the shape of the curve, and the curve is the whole story. The first 10 years are almost flat. The middle 20 bend gently, and the last 15 go nearly vertical, the years where the account earns more annually than you could possibly contribute, where the money finally outruns the man. Everybody starting late gets the flat part. The vertical part is reserved for people who pressed start before they knew why. At 55 years in, he's got $21,000, and he's put in 18 of it. $3,000 of growth for 5 years of doing everything right. Meanwhile, the 18-year-old, same age, same fund, is sitting at $428,000. And that account grew by more than the 45-year-old's entire balance in the last 8 months alone, without a single new dollar going in. That's not a moral failure. That's a calendar. And this is the point where you have to be honest about what a video like this is actually saying to a 45-year-old, because the polite version is a lie. The polite version is, it's never too late. The true version is, it is much, much later than it was, that costs real money. The money is not coming back, and it is still by an enormous margin better than not starting. Both halves of that are true. Most people only ever say one of them. And then at 50, the market breaks. A real one, not a dip. Everything red for a long time. And now watch these three men, because this is where the story gets interesting and where the numbers stop being the point. The 18-year-old, now 50, watches $428,000 become something much less than $428,000. On paper, he loses more in a few months than the 45-year-old has ever had. It's the worst thing that's ever happened to him financially, by an enormous margin. He does nothing. Not because he's brave, because he's been doing nothing for 32 years, and he's extremely good at it. It's not a decision anymore. It's a personality trait, installed accidentally at 18 and never removed. The 30-year-old, now 50, has more trouble. He's got $156,000 and a much shorter fuse because he's spent his whole life knowing he started late. And starting late makes every loss feel like it's costing you something you can't afford. He thinks about it. He talks to someone. He stays in. The 45-year-old nearly quits. And you can't even argue with him. He has $21,000, 5 years of sacrifice, and he's just watched a chunk of it evaporate for reasons nobody can explain to him properly. He has 15 years left and no room for a lost decade. Everything in him says, get out, wait for calm, get back in when it's safe. He stays, barely, out of stubbornness rather than strategy. All three of them keep paying through the crash. All three of them buy in cheap without ever intending to. And the market does what it has, so far, always eventually done. It comes back, and then it comes back further. And when it does, it rewards them in exact proportion to what they had in it, which is the quietest injustice in the whole story. The recovery is not fair. It doesn't reward the man who suffered most or the man who wanted it most. It reads the balance and multiplies. That's all it does. The crash cost the 18-year-old the most money and the least sleep. It cost the 45-year-old almost no money and nearly everything else. And notice what the 18-year-old's real advantage turned out to be during those years. It wasn't the 67,000. It was that by 50 he'd already lived through a decade of the account being boring and pointless and had built entirely by accident the one thing that actually gets tested in a crash: the total inability to be bothered. The 45-year-old had no such training. He'd only ever had 5 years of it, and all 5 were terrifying. Now run it out to 65. All 3 men, same room, same day, same $300 a month, every month, right to the end. The man who started at 45 has $156,000. 20 years of perfect discipline, never missed a payment. Stayed in through the worst market of his life when every instinct told him not to. He put in $72,000 of his own money, and the market gave him $84,000 on top of it. He roughly doubled his money. That's not a failure. That's the system working exactly as advertised. It just wasn't given enough time to do anything spectacular with. And here's what he actually bought with those 20 years, which nobody puts in a thumbnail. $84,000 that did not exist before, for money he was going to have anyway. He didn't get the vertical part of the curve. He got the flat part, and the flat part still paid him $84,000 for doing nothing but waiting. There's no version of this where he'd have been better off not starting. The man who started at 30 has $540,000. 35 years, he put in $126,000 and finished with 4 times it. By any normal standard, this man won. He's got $500,000 from $300 a month and a boring fund and the simple refusal to stop. And the man who started at 18 has $1,315,000. Now here's the number I promised you. He contributed $169,000. The man who started at 30 contributed $126,000. The difference in what they put in is $43,000. The difference in what they got out is $775,000. $43,000 of extra contributions turned into $775,000 of extra outcome. Not because it was better money, not because it was invested more cleverly, purely because it arrived earlier and got left alone longer. And the 45-year-old? For him to have caught the 18-year-old starting at 45, he wouldn't have needed $300 a month. He'd have needed $2,526 a month, every month for 20 years. That's the exchange rate on 12 years of waiting, and then 15 more. Time isn't a discount. Time is the entire product. Money is just what you use to buy it, and the price goes up every single year, and there's no negotiating and no sale. But the cruelest version isn't even in the 3 men we've been watching. It's in a 4th. Take the 18-year-old and stop him at 30. 12 years of payments, $43,000 total, and then he quits. Life happens. He never invests another dollar as long as he lives. He forgets the account exists. 35 years of nothing. At 65, that man has $775,000. He beats the man who started at 30 and paid in faithfully for 35 years. He beats him by $235,000, having contributed $83,000 less and having done absolutely nothing at all for 3.5 decades. 12 years of showing up early beat 35 years of showing up on time. That's not a metaphor. That's just the arithmetic, sitting there, indifferent to how anybody feels about it. Sit with that one for a second, because it dismantles almost everything people believe about money. It says the man who quit beat the man who persisted. It says the amount you contribute is close to irrelevant compared to when you contribute it. It says 35 years of doing the right thing can lose to 12 years of doing it sooner, and that nothing about effort, character, or commitment enters into it anywhere. So what actually separated these men? Not intelligence, same guy. Not income, same salary. Not discipline. If anything, the man who finished last had the most of it, and the man who finished first was mostly just distracted. Not even the money. That's the thing that should stay with you. The $1 Million Man's advantage was $43,000, which is a used car. Everything else, the entire $775,000, was time doing what time does to money that's been left alone. He wasn't rewarded for being smart. He was rewarded for being early, which at 18 isn't a virtue. It's an accident. He didn't understand compounding at 18. Nobody does at 18. He just happened to press start before he understood why it mattered, and then had the good fortune to forget about it for 47 years. Which raises the uncomfortable question this whole thing has been walking toward. If the difference isn't money and isn't discipline and isn't skill, if it's just time, then the one thing that actually built the $1 million is the one thing nobody can send you more of. You can earn more money. You can find more discipline. You can get better advice, a better fund, a better job. Every input in this story can be improved except one, and it's the only one that mattered. And it's the one you're spending right now at whatever age you happen to be, at exactly the rate everyone else is spending theirs, while it feels like nothing at all. That's the whole trick of it. The years don't announce themselves on the way out. They only show up on the statement decades later, priced perfectly. The 45-year-old could not fix his problem by trying harder. There was no amount of wanting it that would close the gap. He would have needed $2,500 a month, which he didn't have, which is why he was starting at 45 in the first place. The trap is circular, and it closes quietly. And the 18-year-old didn't win anything. He didn't beat anybody. He just spent a currency he didn't know he was holding on a Tuesday in 4 minutes, for reasons he couldn't have explained at the time. That's what makes this hard to watch. Every one of these men at every age was doing his best with what he had. The difference between $156,000 and $1.3 million wasn't effort. It was a date on a calendar, chosen mostly by circumstance, decades before any of them understood what it was worth. So no, this isn't about being late. Almost everybody is late. The 30-year-old was late and still finished with $500,000. The 45-year-old was very late and still doubled his money and still ended up with $156,000 more than he'd have had otherwise, which is not nothing, which is in fact quite a lot. The point isn't that starting late loses. The point is that the years themselves were the asset the whole time, not the money, the years. And the only thing you ever get to decide about them is how many you leave on the table before you press start. There are 3 men in 3 identical rooms. Same salary, same fund. Same $300 a month, right to the end. One of them is a millionaire, and it was never because he was better. It's because he was there first. And the only thing he was ever really investing was the one thing he had the most of, at the exact age he valued it least.